Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Imagine living in constant fear, unsure if today is the day that someone you love might be taken away. Well, my guests say this is the new reality that's weighing heavily on the lives of many immigrants. The recent ICE raids carried out by the Trump administration have sent shockwaves through neighborhoods, leaving countless families anxious and on edge. Well, joining me to talk about this today are Dr. Oye Owulewa, DC's shadow representative and immigration attorney, A.K. Opoku. Thank you both so much for having this conversation with us. This is a really important topic. I want to share some fast facts. Immigrants make up about 18% of the labor force in DC. 30% of them are entrepreneurs, and just over 21% are STEM workers. The top countries of origin for immigrants in DC are El Salvador, Ethiopia, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, and China. More than 2/5 of all immigrants in DC are naturalized U.S. citizens. Of course, immigrants are a vital part of our community. They contribute on all levels of the economy, culturally as well, and the demographics of the city. I want to ask you first, can you describe the immediate impact that you believe the recent ICE raids have had on immigrant communities in DC? Attorney A.K. Poku, please share your thoughts about that.
Thank you so much for having me, Harold. It's a
Sure.
pleasure to be on here with you all. As you rightly said, there have been mass deportations that have been ongoing since President Trump assumed office as president, and these mass deportation efforts are having very serious impact within our communities. There's just so much fear and anxiety, and there's a lot of concerns about the future of many immigrants, even those who have lawful status in the United States. Now, one of the things that we've heard the Trump administration say is that they're going to be targeting particular people. They're going to be targeting people, number one, who are undocumented or who are unlawfully in the United States and who have criminal records or are gang members, right? And undocumented means that you either came into the United States without a visa or without a parole. You came in unlawfully, or you came in with a visa and you have overstayed that visa or the period of your authorized stay. It means you are undocumented. And if you are undocumented and you happen to have a criminal record, then you are on their target, right? Topmost target is people who have dangerous criminal records, as they're saying. And then next is people who have other types of criminal records. Now, even though they have these targets that they've mentioned, they are going to be going after, it looks like there are people being picked up who don't fall within these demographics, and that's even sending more concerns within the immigrant communities, because these ICE officers are known to have quotas and numbers. And when you have quotas and numbers, it's a matter of meeting those targets regardless of who may be affected. One other major concern that I've had so far is that President Trump rescinded the ban, previously, ICE could not carry out enforcement actions in sensitive areas like churches, hospitals, schools, courthouses. But now they are able to carry out arrests, interviews, questions in schools, churches, and so on and so forth. Again, ICE is encouraging collaboration between our local police and then ICE officers, meaning the local police have to report things directly to ICE. If there are immigrants who happen to fall in trouble or have encounters with the police, then the local police, they are required, or they are being pushed to collaborate with ICE. Now, one of the
Hold on,
big
before you continue, because I do want to make sure that I have the representative Obulewa come into this conversation. And representative, before we even get into some of your concerns, I want to make sure that people understand your role as it relates to the District of Columbia, not to be confused, obviously, with our elected non-voting Democrat delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that question. And thank you for inviting me to your platform, Harold. As you mentioned, my name is Dr. Oye Owolewa, and I'm the U.S. Representative of Washington, D.C. And because D.C. is not a state, my role is not in Congress. So compared to our Congresswoman Norton, our warrior on the Hill, my office is in the city building, which is the John Wilson, versus her being on the Capitol. We both fight for D.C. statehood. I'm very glad to be in this fight, but she has her own staff on the Capitol. Mine is, as I mentioned before, in the city building. It's not as large, but we both fight for federal legislation that impacts DC residents, and there's no issue that's bigger right now in DC, whether it comes to home rule or immigration situation, and we're really trying to make sure people know the information and then resource. So we put this together to really make sure that people have the information to keep themselves and their friends and family members safe.
I would push back on that now since January 20th, because before January 20th, yes, a lot of people concerned about DC statehood. Suffice it to say, that's out the window right now under this new administration. And one of the main reasons that we are having this conversation is that's been kind of pushed to the back burner. And a lot of people are now very concerned about, number one, immigration, and also that executive order that's still hanging in the air. But for today's conversation, what about immigration? When you talk to your constituents and the people who come to you raising questions, what impact does this have on the immigrant community in the district?
It's a big issue. I mean, as A.K. Poku said, people are concerned about having raids in their churches, in their hospitals, and people are not sending their children to school. We had a town hall where high school seniors were concerned about how they fill out documents for college because President Trump, he introduced an executive order that would eliminate birthright citizenship for folks who have one or more parents who are undocumented. So it has huge ramifications. I mean, there's rumors about shopping markets like Safeway being raided. Even though that didn't happen, people are now concerned about going to these locations because they see them as possible targets. So it's really impacting the everyday life in the district, and people are concerned about it.
Have there been raids in the district?
So we have heard reports of activity at certain public schools. ICE hasn't necessarily told us where they've gone to or where they're going to go. So it's just massive panic and paranoia amongst the non-citizen community. In addition, we have non-citizen residents who are actually elected officials in DC. They're ANC commissioners. And if they take away home rule, our sovereignty, our local government, these people will also lose their jobs. If they pass legislation to eliminate a non-citizen voting in DC, these folks can potentially lose their opportunity to serve their communities. So there's huge ramifications of the federal government interfering with our quality of life here in the district.
Attorney A.K. Poku, we have mostly heard and seen a focus on the Latino culture and community in DC. But the reality is that there are immigrants undocumented and here legally who are not just Latino. There are all kinds of immigrants here. Is it your understanding that there is concern among those who are undocumented who are not Latino? Or is this just, as it appears, just a kind of focus on the brown folks in DC?
Thank you for that. So yes, I mean, it's understandable that the Latino voices are the most heard because they have a lot of numbers, and they're able to communicate their concerns because of the fact that they have a lot of representatives and they are just many. But there's certainly also Africans and people within the Black immigrant communities that are very afraid, but the numbers may not be as many as compared to the Latinos. But the fear is just as large.
Mm-hmm. To that very point, and we have seen reports across the country that immigrants here who are of Latino descent have been stopped and the like. But what about those who may not necessarily be so obvious, who may be Eastern European, but still here illegally? And I can see that smile on your face. And so you go ahead and share with me, AK Poku, your thoughts about that, and then a Representative you as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's very expected, and people have raised concerns about these, that when ICE is, conducting raids and stopping people, right? The law allows them to stop people only where there's a reasonable suspicion that they are here in violation of immigration laws, and ICE should not be able to stop people based on the color of their skin or their country of origin or how they sound. But unfortunately, it's very easy to spot certain types of people who may not blend in, over people who look American, and so should, perhaps may not be questioned. And so there's certainly that concern about people of a certain origin being more a target of these ICE raids.
And suffice it to say, Representative, it always raises a question of what does an American look like, but that's
Exactly.
that's another show. But please go right ahead.
Well, I mean, as a black man, we understand the danger of racial profiling, right? In previous administrations, they will have to be a target on a specific person who you're going after in terms of deportation. Now, in this current administration, they're allowing something called collateral arrests, meaning that if someone's wanting to come and arrest me and they see somebody down the street that they think might not be a citizen, they go after that person too without any reason and just harass them. Now, you know what danger that could be? Who looks like an American? Who looks like they're supposed to be here? And oftentimes, people have a natural tendency to talk too much to police or too much to an ICE agent to defend their innocence. And if you don't have legal representation or if you don't know your rights, you could be tricked out of your safety, out of your spot in America, even if you have a reason to be here. So it's really important to know this information, but also fight for the people who aren't always at City Hall, who aren't always the ones you see lobbying for legislation, to really protect the minority community and make sure, regardless of what language you speak first, what country you're from, that you have the information to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And we do know that there have been reports over the past month or so about Puerto Ricans, people who were born in Puerto Rico, who have been arrested and, of course, subsequently let go only because they were arrested because they were speaking Spanish. And there have also been questions raised about how much training these ICE agents have and how much knowledge they have about people who, while they may not have necessarily been born in the continental United States, such as those from Guam or, as I said, Puerto Rico, and they are still getting picked up, causing confusion, and the like. I want to talk about all of those things. I also do want to talk, AK Poku, about what has changed legally in the days before the inauguration and since, and what kind of advice you would give those who are in the immigrant community who are afraid. But please, I need to take just a brief break. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next. That's on WHUR-FM. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM channel 141. We continue our conversation about immigration and the new Trump administration's policies. My guests are Dr. Oye Owulewa and immigration attorney A.K. Poku. Dr. Owulewa is the DC Shadow Representative. I want to go back to what I was discussing before the break, A.K. Poku. What has happened between or before the inauguration and since the Trump administration came in? We do know that, for example, protected status was eliminated. But I'm sure there are some other legal changes that have been a shock to the system of the immigrant community.
Yes, there have been several changes. We'll start with, some of these lawful status that was granted by former President Biden, some of the parole statuses that have been terminated. And also there's now the suspension of entry at the southern border. So asylum is now being restricted. There's the suspension of the refugee program also currently by President Trump. And obviously when we come to the interior enforcement, even now legal immigration is also being targeted. So the fact that there's the fact that some people are here unlawfully, but the law allows them to file some type of waivers to seek forgiveness for their unlawful presence in the United States. So for example, if you come into the US unlawfully, you can then file something called a 601A waiver of unlawful presence. And so this is something that is allowed under law. However, the ICE officers are saying, well, if you're here illegally, sometimes they don't care what you have pending. They can pick you up and deport you. And so it's very confusing currently because we're just hearing so many conflicting situations based on the inconsistency of the ICE enforcement around the country. So those are some of the changes so far. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was the fact that Trump is encouraging, again, the collaboration between local police and then, federal enforcement. And this is likely going to have a very devastating impact within our communities and families, because if I'm an undocumented person and somebody perpetrates a crime against me and I need to call 911, I will be very afraid to call 911, because if I call 911 and the police comes, they're likely going to refer me to ICE because I'm undocumented. This is going to breed a lot of mistrust within our local communities, and it's going to be very dangerous for our children and our families. And these effects are likely going to be seen very soon.
Representative?
Yes, I'd like to add to that as well. There's one macro level decision that Trump has made that's going to devastate the entire planet. His freezing of U.S. aid. This is the money that goes to other countries to support humanitarian issues, soft diplomacy that we've been engaged since World War II to really ensure the stability of this planet. When he froze that money, or essentially trying to eliminate it altogether, he's going to create a lot of instability around this world that oftentimes increase the amount of migration people have outside of their home countries, which can actually lead to more people trying to come into this country. So that's devastated a lot of people around the world. It's in the family members that live here in the United States. I want to make sure we don't forget that.
A.K. Poku, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I need you to drill down a little bit more. If you are here as an undocumented immigrant, but was in process, let us say that you had hired an attorney and you were going through the process of citizenship, not there yet, but obviously trying to follow the law. What has happened in the past month? Is all of that just out the door now?
Okay, so yeah, that's a very good question, Harold. And what we're seeing is that there are people who are in process. They could have an asylum case pending, or they could have some other family-based petition pending based on their eligibility. So if you're married, for example, to a US citizen and you came in, let's say lawfully, you've overstayed your visa, the US citizen spouse can apply for a green card for you, and you can be here while you go through the process. Now, even though you have overstayed your visa, you have something pending, right? And so you should ordinarily not be the target of ICE enforcement. But There are people being picked up who have cases pending in immigration courts. And the problem that that raises is that it's a drain on the resources of the United States, because they should be targeting people who don't have anything going. Because if eventually these people who are in process, they could get their green cards or get status within the next 2 years, 1 year, it's just a waste of resources to go after those people who would eventually regularize. And so it's more important that ICE will target people who are not attempting to regularize their situation and who do have, criminal records, or people who may already have prior removal orders and who should be out of the country. Those should be the target of ICE. Another thing I wanted to add was that you mentioned what are some of the changes. One of the other major changes that have happened is that prior to Trump's first day in office, initially there was something called expedited removal. And what expedited removal was that if you were found 100 miles near a land border and you had entered the US just within the last 14 days, then you could be expeditiously removed without appearing before an immigration judge. Now, Trump issued, there was a designation by the Trump administration saying that the entire US territory or the entire nation is grounds for expedited removal. And not only has the geographic limitation expanded, now the time limit, if you've been here for less than 2 years, it's no longer less than 2 weeks. Then you can't be expeditiously removed if you enter the United States without permission or you entered the US with misrepresentation. And what this does is that it reduces the numbers of people who can have due process. Due process, if you are being sent to immigration court, you have a right to counsel in front of an immigration judge. Now, the expedited removal process does not allow you due process, because you will not have the time or the chance to be able to have your day in court and to assert reliefs available to you. Of course, you have the opportunity to let the ICE officer know if you have a fear of persecution or being returned to your home country, but that's as far as it gets. Expedited removal is a more quick and summary removal from the United States without allowing you to go through due process. And so that has been expanded throughout the United States as well.
Representative, when you look at the diversity of the Black community in DC, what are your concerns about the impact of the Trump administration?
I think people are concerned. I think people are scared. I think when it comes to Trump administration, people have a lot of despair. We see attacks on DEI, whether it's Black related, Hispanic related, female related opportunities. And last but not least, I kind of mentioned this earlier, we see a bill in Congress to remove DC's home rule, which is the way we elect our mayor, the way we elect our DC council. So everything's on full array. We have federal workers living in the district who are losing their job, who are being furloughed. So it's not just one thing. There's just a systematic approach to essentially rid our entire communities of opportunities. Whether it's Black people, folks who they're Washingtonians, or even transplants into the nation's capital, we're seeing a unified sense of a need to fight. We're seeing elected officials like myself being called on to be more vocal about these issues and what they're tearing away.
But I really think about some of the more foundational parts of our community, where a lot of times when those of us who were born here, Black people, when we interact with immigrants, whether we know their status or not, it is often in the restaurant.
Right.
Okay. It is often, those who are, and in some cases, have been here for years, decades. Okay. They own businesses. They are taxpayers. They are the ones who have these landscaping businesses, who, as I said, they own your favorite Ethiopian spot. They own your favorite African spot, to get that spicy soup. or the Jamaican spot, and I just wonder, in the long term of this, could we see an elimination of the things that, for example, make DC the kind of place that we have all grown accustomed to?
Absolutely. And there's one other industry we have to focus on as well: healthcare, home aids, allowing seniors to age with dignity in their households. This is all the things that not only immigrants are doing, but are very involved in the fabric of DC. So we are threatening the quality of life and the culture and the history of the nation's capital. We all built this together, and we deserve to continue to do so.
AK Poku, what should someone do now if you're undocumented here? There's got to be more than just hiding at home. I know that having had some interaction with some Latino business owners, where they say they're now afraid to travel, as you said, because they were undocumented. These are not criminals. These are law-abiding citizens. They have children in the school system, but we've already seen a pullback by them. What should they do?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very broad question. And I'll start by saying that there's not a one size fits all advice that I can give to everybody. Obviously, we've heard it over and over again. People should familiarize themselves with their rights, right? Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, Sixth Amendment rights. Fourth means that you're protected against unlawful searches and seizures. And so this is where people are aware that ICE needs a judicial warrant signed by a judge to be able to come into your home without your consent. They cannot just search you without your consent. Fifth Amendment rights, you have a right to due process. Sixth Amendment rights, you have a right to counsel. Now, some of the issues that we're seeing now is that because there's all of this is moving at such a fast pace, we have to know how to strategize at each point in time. When we heard of mass deportations, the advice we were giving was that, okay, well, when ICE meets you in the street, say nothing, invoke your right to silence. And the example I sometimes say is that, or I sometimes give is that, you have a right to food, a fundamental right to food. But it doesn't mean you can walk into McDonald's and invoke your right to eat, your fundamental right to eat, or when you see Chipotle, you invoke your right to eat. You have the right, but you should know how and when to invoke that right. Otherwise, it becomes absurd or counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. And so previously, we all know that, okay, mass deportations, we expected that Trump administration would process people through courts. But it looks like that's not happening. They changed strategies now. There's expedited removal. So you're not even going to get a chance to go to court. And so what was happening was that if you now advise, previously we're saying, well, don't say anything. Well, if ICE encounters you and they are looking for proof that you've been here for more than 2 years, and you perhaps came in with a visa and you don't say anything, then you could be a victim to expedited removal. And so it's very difficult to give one specific legal advice, but obviously people should definitely know their rights and certainly speak with an attorney about their specific situations so that they can know how to navigate some complex situations.
So here's another question. I'm a citizen. I don't have an accent, unless you want to call it a DC accent. So what if I'm on the street in front of my house and an ICE agent comes up to arrest me? How do I prove that I'm a citizen? How do I prove that I am here legally? How would you, AK Poku, prove that you are here as a citizen? Do you need to walk around with your papers?
That's a good question. Again, we shouldn't have to do this. Obviously, nobody has to
Certainly,
walk around
yeah.
with their papers. But if you're looking to get, you're looking to avoid the escalation of some of these encounters, then you could have copies of perhaps proof of your US citizenship on your phone if you want to. You don't have to because you're a US citizen. And in fact, before ICE can put you in expedited removal, you can say that I'm a US citizen, and they're required to, under Section I and under Section 235B of the Immigration and Nationality Act, to verify your status as a US citizen. So once you now say you're a US citizen, the burden shifts on them to verify. But they would then detain you before they can carry out that verification process. And so if you want to avoid being detained, I guess it's easier to tell them and also perhaps carry proof on you to show that you're a US citizen, even though you don't have to.
I mean, I have a Maryland driver's license, and I know that some of those who may be undocumented, depending on, what state they live in, they may have a different kind of driver's license. So would my driver's license save me?
Well, I guess it depends on the ICE officer. If he wants it to save you, if he's convinced, then that could save you. It's just hard to predict what they're going to do. Let me mention that one of the executive orders actually says something really interesting. The executive order that lifted the ban on immigration enforcement in sensitive locations, it actually said that ICE officers are going to be using common sense. They're going to be using their common sense to carry out some of these enforcement actions. So it also boils down to who the ICE officer you meet is, what they had for breakfast, and whether they're feeling happy or not, right? Because there's just so many permutations that you cannot correctly predict how things are going to play out each time.
It almost makes you want to carry your passport around, yeah. or like she said, Representative. Let me see. Let me make sure I have, 235B right here in my. I mean, I joke, but this is not funny,
right?
And for you, for AK Poku, for anyone who encounters an ICE officer, whether you have an accent or whether or not English is or is not your first language, but if you are a citizen, whether you were born in Guam or whether you were born in Puerto Rico, or any other, the U.S. Virgin Islands, for example, I could go on and on and on. So this isn't just about making the Latino community uncomfortable. This very well could be every community of color.
And that's the biggest concern. We're talking about officer discretion. We're talking about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You could be in a barbershop, and if ICE comes in and they will sweep, they're not going to look at you and exempt you because of what you look like. And that's the importance of talking to an attorney before you're in a situation. Because as we mentioned before about a warrant, a lot of people don't know what warrants even look like. So you can say, I have a warrant here, and the warrant may say you can only be on the steps or you can only look in the living room. But once the officer's in the living room, what's going to stop them going to the bedroom? Stops them from going to the backyard. So it's all about knowing before you need to know this information, because once you're in this situation, how are you going to make sure that you're calm when ICE agents with guns are in front of your face? How are you going to make sure that you can know how to de-escalate or know your rights when you're in this situation? So that's why it's important for having conversations like this, going to speak to immigration attorneys before you're in a situation, because what you know beforehand can really save you and the loved ones around you.
There have been events addressing this particular issue, and I understand there may be one coming up. There's one coming up this weekend. Can you share some information with us about that?
Absolutely. We actually had our very first inaugural immigration town hall. It was actually in Columbia Heights with a large Hispanic, Latinx, and Black community that came together, and we talked about these things. In fact, AK Poku was one of our keynote law attorneys speaking on certain issues. This Saturday, we're actually having a virtual town hall at 12 noon Eastern time, which AK Poku and as well another Latinx attorney will be there as well. We're also bringing 2 bilingual ANC commissioners living in Ward 1. They speak both English and Spanish. We're going to be able to talk about government resources as well. And this information, like I said before, is all about arming our communities with information and also being honest. We don't want to give people false hopes. We don't want to tell people because we're on the call, we can answer all your questions. We really want to help people get that first step in protecting themselves.
For those who want to participate, can you share the specific information so that they can make sure that they are on this virtual town hall event?
Absolutely. We can share the information. To go register for the Zoom is bit.ly/immigration with a capital I, Immigration Town Hall. But we'll also share.
Slow down just a little bit. I want to make sure that you said Bentley.
Bit.ly, bit.ly/immigration town hall with a capital I. And that will lead you to the Zoom registration.
One more time, because I want to make sure that we do post this on our website as well for those who may not have heard this either on Sirius XM or WHUR. So you said it's bit.ly, bit.ly/
Immigration Town Hall.
Immigration Town Hall. You said that you didn't want to give people false hope. Talk about the uncomfortable reality of that.
It's very tough because, as you, AK Poku, mentioned before, things are changing by the week. President Trump's only been in office for 3 weeks. We're talking about the extension of discretion, the extension of where people can be found at. Previous years, immigrants were able to go to faith communities or go to the church or the synagogue and feel protected over there. We have to let them know that ICE is now able to go into these locations. They're able to go into your child's school. They're able to go into the hospital and get information. In the past, we had non-citizen residents who were signing up to vote in DC because the District of Columbia allows non-citizens to vote. We had to let them know you can still do so right now, but there's all these challenges and all these risks you're taking. We're not telling people not to do these things, but they have to know, because at the end of the day, me being a child of immigrants, I think it's my job to make sure everyone feels protected and everyone knows the law and everyone's updated with this information as they come down.
AK Poku, I want to get into kind of the business of the legality. You are a working attorney. That is your bread and butter. But a lot of undocumented immigrants, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have a lot of money. And they are, working day to day, hand to mouth. It's not paycheck to paycheck. It is whatever, whether they have a business or they may be day working or they own a restaurant or what have you. What you make that day is what you survive on for the next day. So how do you balance your business as an attorney with the limited resources that a lot of undocumented immigrants have?
That's a very interesting question. And yes, there's I would say that first of all, there are a section of undocumented immigrants who may not have money, but there's also immigrants who work very hard and are able to afford legal services. Mm-hmm. But again, there is that section who is unable to afford legal services. Those people can fall on their partners, family members, and other things. And we also offer payment plans with our services. There are some nonprofits that offer legal services or legal aid, but obviously those nonprofits are overworked and sometimes they don't have grants. And so there's really that gap or that disconnect. We try to bridge it by having a lot of informational sessions to advise people as much as we can. But once people come up to us and want to work with us, then obviously they have to get support to make payment. There are also some financial institutions that offer third-party payment plans to these immigrants. And so they will pay the law the law firms up front, and then the immigrants can do payment plans to these institutions. Some of the law firms like ours also offers payment plans to these immigrants. So we try to, meet them where they're at. But it's very important to also understand that immigration is the second most complex area of law in the US. The GAO, Government Accountability Office, that's a body that gives non-partisan, fact-based information to Congress. They have said that immigration is most complex second to tax law. And so it's a lot of work. And so immigration is not cheap. It's important to seek out the right legal advice, and sometimes trying to get it through cheap means can end up being very expensive for people and their future. So for the people that understand the value that we're providing, they try to work with us, and we're not unaware that they sometimes could be in difficult situations. So we try to work with the communities as much as we can.
Have you ever had a client that you were working with, and while working with them found that they had been deported?
No, actually, no. One situation comes to mind. We had a client, and this was a lawful permanent resident. This was about a couple of years ago. And as a lawful permanent resident, this is one information that people don't know. People don't realize that as a green card holder, you can be deported from the US. They think that, I'm a green card holder, and so I'm a permanent resident, I'm untouchable. That's not true. So this lawful permanent resident had been here in the US for like 20 years. And for some reason, he never bothered to become a US citizen, take it a step further. And he was caught with some drugs in his car, or sitting with some people with some drugs. So it was, I guess, recreational. I don't remember the details too much. And so he was apprehended and sent to immigration courts for removal proceedings. We were able to work something out with the immigration courts through a process known as prosecutorial discretion. And unfortunately for us, the client was so worried, so apprehensive, that he actually left the US to go to his country. He self-deported even before we could get his case out of immigration court. That's just one of the instances where we've had somebody who self-deported. But usually, no, we've not had any of our clients get deported in the middle of the process.
We are out of time. I think this is a good spot to end this conversation, but for today. But certainly, this is a long-term conversation as it relates to immigration, and of course, Representative, also on the statehood issue. It may be on the back burner, but the fire is still under it, if I may. So thank you both for sharing your information and your resources. And I would just say, keep doing the work that you're doing. This is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So thank you again so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much, everyone.
This is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, February 18th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.